So this camera does, to me, feel like the culmination of everything Leica. Well, maybe not the Leica that makes rangefinders, but really the Leica that makes beautiful things that work, for the most part, beautifully. Before I go any further, I feel like I have to admit that I'm a bit of a Leica fanboy. I like most of what they do. A lot of their cameras that aren't, well, including the M bodies, show up and they seem like they show up late, and they've got old tech in them. The raw files aren't as good, and they just kind of are underwhelming if you're into specs and just the high-end stuff. But that's kind of changed now. This is a very special camera, and simply put, I think this disrespected and dismissed little guy changed what I thought about how consumer cameras and hell, consumer user experience should work. It's got really everything you need and everything you don't need, but set up in a hierarchy that really lets you get on with the actual use of the camera. And yes, I'm, obviously and painfully aware that cell phones have destroyed the dedicated camera or the family camera or whatever you want to call it. This isn't because of what they give you in terms of convenience, but what they take away. Control, mainly. You get auto HDR, skin smoothing, and, making people look like wax dolls. And just taking things away and taking them out of your hand. And it really pisses me off. I hate using cell phone cameras, even most of the iPhones now, given I haven't tried the newest one, but I am aware of the specs, and they're very impressive, but I just hate using them. Seems like the complications in trying to get rid of the solutions that I never asked for, it's kind of forcing us to make our way back and come full circle to what this bit of solid aluminum showed us could have been. And kind of is, because the TL2 and the CL are still around, and they really did start with this guy. This was the first camera back in 2014 with the T-mount, which is now the L-mount. And it works wonderfully with M-mount lenses and Leica's R-mount lenses, which I use this a lot with Leica's R-mount lenses. I use it with Voigtlanders, with M42s, and it works so well with adapted glass because it's got an old sensor and it's got limited dynamic range and the raw files are kind of crap, which goes really well with old glass, believe it or not. It really does feel like cell phone running Android. It's very intuitive and easy to use, and you get custom menus and all this other stuff, and it's got 2 dials and a shutter button. The startup time kind of sucks, but that's fine, and there's lag in use, but whatever. It's an old camera. There's certain things that you can kind of deal with, and you should expect out of a camera with a certain age. It has autofocus, but it's not all that great. It's contrast detect, it's snappy, I guess, in daylight, but really any type of complicated or dimly lit lighting situation, the autofocus doesn't work all that well at all. It's got a low resolution display. The manual focus is actually a little bit difficult to pull off, I'll be honest. But what's there just generally works, and it really gets out of your way. And I absolutely love this camera for that. The raw files, I'll be honest, they're not that great, especially by modern standards. They really aren't. But they do kind of remind me of the M8 I know M8 is APS-H, so you're not getting quite the same crop factor, but the way the blacks kind of have a little bit of thinness to them, they just feel like there's a bit of information missing from the highlights and the blacks. You fight the shadows a little bit, so they're not the best files to work with, but they're not the worst. But they do give you this kind of vintagey feel and charm that's kind of appealing, honestly. Low light. Your phone's going to outshoot this in low light, especially if you've got a fairly decent recent iPhone. We are obviously in 2022, and this has since been passed by the T2 and the CL, and I think the CL2 is coming out. And the Leica Q really showed up and made this camera absolutely useless and worthless and not worth getting. But it's still good. The JPEGs, I would say, are hit or miss. When you nail it, it's like the M8 or M9, but for people that use social media reluctantly and still remember dial-up fondly for some reason. What I'm saying is we're kind of old people that still remember the relevancy of these things. It's a niche item, and it's been passed over by more affordable and more physically dedicated cameras that are specific for the type of photography that people like to do. But this experience showed me what could have been if only for a little longer. Yeah, it was eventually always going to get surpassed by cell phones, especially something like this, but it could have held out a little longer. We could have gotten some more interesting tech out of it. And honestly, I gotta say, if I had tried this in 2014, I probably would have called it a pretty amazing experience. You know, I don't think this line is doing all that well for Leica. I don't know if there's going to be a TL3, but maybe camera companies need to go back to 2014 and look at this thing that was maybe a little ahead of its time and learn some of the lessons from how the menus work and how it just would get out of your way. And it even had internal memory. This was such a good experience. And I just kind of wanted to share it, kind of give it its due. I still use this camera. I still love it. I still plan to use it. I took it on a little road trip with me, and you'll probably see some of that footage in this video, or I might save it for a future video. But I absolutely, I know this is like the 5th time I'm saying it, but I absolutely love this camera. It's just one of those things. You can't explain why you love it, but you know that you do. The plan for the next few videos is going to involve the Canon R, which I had for a little while, and along with the R, I took the M and then this guy on a couple of road trips with me. So those 2 videos should be coming up next if I don't combine them into this. If you use this camera, if you're familiar with it, if you use the CL, the TL2, I'd honestly appreciate your input and see what you like about it, what you dislike about it, and if you still have it or got rid of it or are planning to get rid of it. I guess I'm hanging on to this one for a very long time. I have a feeling it's probably just going to be dead one day, and that's going to be that. Anyway, see you in the next one.